Animal Farm.
Hi, Lucky.
What's up?
We are going on vacation.
I do hope it's somewhere good.
What does that say?
Laughter House!
That sounds awesome. I love to laugh.
It's a slaughterhouse.
Look at all this deliciousness. They want this.
Do you want to be food, or do you want freedom? Then let's fight for it! We're free! Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy.
4 legs, good. 2 legs, bad.
No animal shall wear clothes.
Huff. What? We're show pigs.
And all animals are equal.
Animals running a farm? I had to see it for myself.
Thank you. Aw, so cute.
Activate cute eyes.
I'd rather gouge them out.
You know this is not going to be an anti-fascist work, but instead an anti-communist work. I already know it. George Orwell himself, despite his, socialist beginnings, also actively in his later years became, anti-USSR pretty aggressively and was objectively anti-communist. So any kind of sincere approach to this would still probably take an anti-communist stance regardless. But can't wait for this to be a pro-capitalist, pro-free market, libertarian, anti-communist work. A couple things are really interesting about this. Okay, so one, it's Angel Studios, right? The stuff that they're doing is somewhat right-wing slop, Christian slop, but at the same time, they got I think they have Laverne Cox in the Animal Farm movie as well, which is interesting because I guess they don't give a shit. While they are conservative, they clearly don't care about a trans person doing voice acting in their movie. Oh yeah, here it is. Sound of Freedom, official trailer. The King of Kings, David and Goliath, like you've never seen.
Want that farm?
We should move into the farmhouse. So the humans know we're in charge.
You are about to become my new best friends. Pigs and humans working together. I like the optics.
Oh, we love the optics. What are optics?
I think it's a kind of seafood. You're wearing clothes!
Would you look at that? I am.
Everything's...
Anyway, but the distribution is, see? A satirical allegory of revolution and power. Animal Farm traces out movement for equality is systematically corrupted. As the pigs consolidate control, truth is erased, dissent is crushed, and the farm descends into a ruthless dictatorship, fulfilling Orwell's warning about the dangers of communism. Here we go.
different, but we're still friends.
All
Yeah,
animals
theme song is by Portugal the Man, who are prominent leftists. Seth Rogen is obviously the main protagonist, who himself is anti-Zionist and pretty socially progressive as well. And yet the distribution is being handled by the guys who made Sound of what was it? Sound of Freedom. Yeah, Sound of Freedom, the psychotic Jim Caviezel movie. And the rest of their slop is just like super duper right wing. Seth Rogen isn't that progressive? No, he is. Why are actors selling out to this slop for this slop? I don't think they know who's going to be distributing it when they sign on board. And also, most American progressives don't know about George Orwell's anti-communist leanings. Okay, that's the other thing. Knowing about George Orwell, even knowing that George Orwell was a socialist, is not something that the average American knows. That is precisely the reason why Animal Farm, 1987, brother, Animal Factory, all of those takes are unironically utilized more often than not by right-wingers. There's a reason why right-wingers love 1997, brother. It's an OG meme in this community for a reason. What is this?
It's one of the longest-running arguments in science fiction. Wherever dudes with wraparound shades and a gun collection.
Science fiction with Damien Walter. Is 1984 a warning against fascism or socialism? It's definitely not a warning against socialism. I will say that. It's not. That's ridiculous. It's definitely a warning against fascism, for sure. It is anti-fascist in his work. George Orwell was an anti-fascist. However, he was also anti-communist. Okay, he's one of those. He's British. Okay, this is how British people are. All right, just don't lean into too much. Don't try to understand it. Okay, the CIA airdropped Orwell everywhere. Yes. It's one of those ways where people will say, oh, this is anti-authoritarian, okay? Anti-totalitarian, anti-authoritarian. It's anti-Stalin, and it's anti-Hitler. I think we all know what that looks like in practice. George Orwell himself was an anti-fascist I guess he was of anarchist background, but he also literally ratted out communists.
1984. Hi there. Did you know that Orwell was just an all-around horrible human being? Well, he was a worse writer, which really is the major issue with him. If you didn't know, George Orwell was a snitch, a rapist, a racist, a colonial cop, and a CIA puppet, whether knowingly or unknowingly. His "it's okay to leave your nephew with me" mustache is only the cherry on top. First, about the man himself. The son of a British colonial officer from a wealthy landed family, he began his career as a British imperial official in Southeast Asia, basically a colonial cop. He was a little conflicted by his role, but not out of a conviction against the evils of imperialism and colonialism, but because the, and I quote, yellow faces, as he called them.
Okay, I'll be honest with you. Hakeem is way more aggro on Orwell because there is the good and the bad. Okay, there is the good and the bad. Like he was, again, like I said, he was definitely anti-fascist. Okay, but he was also very, very anti-Stalin.
Didn't look kindly at him. In the end, the sneering yellow faces of young men that met me everywhere, the insults hooted at me when I was at a safe distance, got badly on my nerves. Who would have guessed that being an occupier wouldn't get roses rained on you? His entire write-up basically drips of hatred for the local Burmese, as well as a backward logic where imperialism wasn't bad solely because of the processes that made it up, but because the colonized expected a certain attitude of a colonial official that Orwell himself found difficult to fill, apparently. Let's quote the man some more, shall we? All I knew was that I was stuck between my hatred of the empire I served and my rage against the evil-spirited little beasts who tried to make my job impossible. He repeats this pattern often, says something incredibly racist, but turns around with a, oh, but I don't really like empire all that much either. Between uninspired and unconvincing prose about disliking empire, though he still found it quote-unquote respectable, whatever that means, he falls with, I thought that the greatest joy in the world would be to drive a bayonet into a Buddhist priest's guts. Mighty authoritarian of you, Eric. Hold on, if he hates the Burmese and uses these terms, then surely a self-proclaimed socialist would have even harsher words for the most notorious fascist of all, right? Let's have a look. I should like to put it on record that I have never been able to dislike Hitler. I have reflected that I would certainly kill him if I could get within reach of him, but that I could feel no personal animosity. The fact is that there is something deeply appealing about him. One feels, as with Napoleon, that he is fighting against destiny, that he can't win, and yet that he somehow deserves to. Jesus fucking Christ. The simplest benchmark for any reasonable human being is to have a burning hatred for fascism, but apparently even that's too much for Orwell. Instead, in the height of World War II, he says the willingness to criticize Russia and Stalin is the test of intellectual honesty. Yes, echoing many a reactionary and liberal in red paint we see today. That's not
I think his greatest hang-up is his British origin.
to say that one shouldn't criticize, etc., etc., but there's a time, place, and format where it's most constructive, if your criticism is good faith to begin with. And the middle of a fascist takeover of Europe and beyond.
Like, that is objectively the worst time to criticize Stalin. Like, even the deepest of Stalin haters, I think, if they are criticizing Stalin at the peak of World War II, then they're, you know, your priorities are not straight, okay? It's one of the best things he did.
Isn't it? See my video on left-wing anti-communism for more about this perspective. Let's move on to his list making. Orwell reported on his friends and acquaintances to the Information Research Bureau, a dedicated organization within the British government founded in order to publish anti-communist material and fight revolutionary, anti-colonial, and pro-independence movements. This office not only got the rights to Orwell's works, but also directly translated and published Animal Farm and his other garbage works into 20 languages on every continent on Earth. In fact, Orwell's entire literary reputation is due to direct CIA and other anti-communist organization efforts at popularizing his nonsense, which is telling because his work on the face of it really is unimpressive. Regardless, back to the list.
Wiki says 9 million deaths under Stalin if foreseeable deaths arising from policies are taken into account. I'm correct, I think. Yeah, I mean, it ranges from 9 million to 100 million. And if that calculation holds, any person currently that is not having children because it's just too costly is considered a death due to capitalism and a death due to, like, I guess, American-backed capitalism. So those numbers would be in the multiple billions. The assessment does not hold. The calculation that people make when they're talking about, like, deaths born out of Stalin and communism is oftentimes utterly ridiculous. Mismanagement and famine aside, which for the record was commonplace even at that point, you have to analyze the material conditions of Russia at that stage in time. You have to look at the productive capabilities. You have to look at the likelihood of famine occurring in these areas, accelerated by mismanagement for sure. Okay. And you have to also look at whether or not famine was commonplace in the aftermath. I think that the worst aspects of Stalin revolve around the paranoia and at times not actually taking a more internationalist stance. I'm not a trop by any means. Okay. Having said that, I do think that given the limited confines, I'm understanding of the unimaginable sacrifice that the USSR took in World War II and how difficult it was for international cooperation when it came down to, like, defending Korea, for example, right? It was quite difficult for the USSR. And also I would go so far as to say Stalin was a little, not lived up necessarily, but genuinely thought that the West would be infinitely nicer in their and more collaborative in their stance in the post-World War II environment. And that was wrong, obviously. That calculation was, as far as foreign policy goes, that calculation was wrong. I don't even know how he would have been able to overcome that, though, given the unimaginable death toll of World War II. And then also the deep paranoia and the incredible amounts of jailing dissidents, limited amounts of technologically available surveillance state at the time, mismanagement. There is a lot of aspects of Stalin that is worthy of criticism. At the end of the day, when you look at it, the USSR no longer exists. If FDR was still in, or Henry Wallace, FDR's first VP, there would have been much more diplomatic order post-World War II. I agree. There's also the Russification initiatives as well. That wasn't too great as well. Yeah, there was a lot of issues. Anyway, the point is, if you take any sort of nuanced approach to this subject, a lot of liberals, they lose their minds. As far as W's on the board, Nazi annihilation, pretty good. Profound W. Centralization and turning the USSR from a backwater agrarian peasant state that was under the oppressive thumb of the czars into one that defeated the United States of America in the space race as the first country to send a human being, Yuri Gagarin, into space in an incredibly short amount of time. That is an unimaginable W, okay? Sorry, that shit, you can't take that away. Not 20 years, but still likely a relative short amount of time. Yes, it's an unimaginably short amount of time. Western countries benefited from 400 years of raping Africa, okay? Both literally and figuratively, whether it be the extraction of wholesale human beings in the form of chattel slavery, or even the bounties that they reaped off of empire. You might say, oh, well, Russia was an empire too. It's not even comparable. And also the distributive efforts or the distribution of said imperial bounty was not the same, clearly. So much so that there was a fucking successful revolution in Russia as opposed to everywhere else. So at the end of the day, they were able to do that within the confines of the USSR in a relatively short period of time, an incredibly short period of time, as opposed to the development that took place in Western nations, descendants of continuers of the imperial legacy.
This Paul Robeson, arguably one of the most famous people of the past century, airbrushed out of history because of his communist leanings, as very anti-white, a Wallace supporter in his snitch list, with zero evidence either in reality or within his deluded mind, aside from a typical racist presumption that wanting non-whites to be treated like human beings must mean you hate all whites as well.
Yeah, all while losing more than 20 million people fighting the Nazi scourge. I'd say that's pretty impressive.
Notes Jew and Jewess next to people many times incorrectly in a time where European Jews had just faced the Holocaust. Deutscher, Polish Jew, Dryberg, Tom, English Jew, Chaplin, Charles, Jewish? My guy, why is this so important to you? It makes you think. He also kept a paranoid list of names for himself, by the way, with the same weird pattern reproduced. Some liberals like to pretend that the lists were only to prevent these people from working for the Secret Service, but naivety is a liberal pastime, and so is absolute faith in nefarious institutions like the IRB, which played a significant role in things as diverse as the Suez Crisis and the Troubles. Why you wouldn't want people who could sabotage the propaganda efforts of an empire you supposedly hate so much, I have no idea, but it is telling. You'd also have to be incredibly gullible to think lists of leftists, anti-colonial figures, minorities, etc. were done in good faith and for a good purpose. Regardless, as a liberal darling, all of his obvious ignorance and suspicion of Jews, LGBT people, and blacks is skated over without a peep or mention. Had any other post-war leftist made remarks of this kind, you'd for sure know about it, and their problematic nature would litter the prefaces of their published works. Yet, no mention. Liberals are so intentionally blind that they claim his attempted of his adolescent girlfriend was a quote-unquote botched seduction, in which she had shouted, screamed, and kicked before running home with a torn skirt and bruised hip. Yes, that's apparently a botched seduction to liberals, when a 190cm tall man corners and forces himself onto a tiny 150cm tall woman. Arguably, his magnum opus, Animal Farm, was written in 1943 and 44, yet not a mention or room in his mind for condemning fascism as it was ravaging Europe, with the only power at the time actually kicking Nazi Germany's teeth in being the Soviet Union, which he spent the entirety of the war as well as his life condemning and satirizing. At the same time during the war, the IRD, which he would work for, was making connections with Ukrainian nationalists, of which many directly aided the Nazi Einsatzgruppen as they went about their program of a mono-ethnic Ukraine without Jews, Poles, Gypsies, and communists. There's even evidence to suggest that Orwell knew and approved of this. To quote a great article you should read, Isaac Asimov also points out a shocking fact that conveniently escapes the myriad disciples of the British author. George Orwell spent the peak years of genocidal destruction of World War II writing a childish story about how evil the Nazi-killing Soviet Union supposedly was. As Asimov points out, Orwell wasn't much affected apparently by the Nazi brand of totalitarianism, for there was no room within him except for his private war with Stalinist communism. Consequently, when Great Britain was fighting for its life against Nazism, and the Soviet Union fought as an ally in the struggle and contributed rather more than its share in lives lost and in resolute courage, Orwell wrote Animal Farm, which was a satire of the Russian Revolution and what followed, picturing it in terms of a revolt of barnyard animals against human masters. He completed Animal Farm in 1944 and had trouble finding a publisher since it wasn't a particularly good time for upsetting the Soviets. As soon as the war came to an end, however, the Soviet Union was fair game and Animal Farm was published. In fact, Orwell went out of his way to manufacture a fantasy that couldn't possibly be mistaken for Nazism, because, as everyone knows, the people and ideology that materially supported every single genuine liberation and independence movement in existence are the true evil.
Baby.
Of course, not a single line critiquing American genocidal policies globally, or their constant warmongering and saber-rattling, and their sanctions and bombing of poor third-world countries trying to detach from colonial regimes that had oppressed them for decades if not centuries. Nothing on the Spanish or French or Portuguese. His only genuine vitriol and whatever passed for criticism, oscillating between childish storytelling and verbose ranting, was exclusively reserved for socialist countries, and specifically the USSR, a country he never visited, never read about, and never interacted with the politics of. This point can't be understated. Orwell actually knew next to nothing about the USSR, and the misconceptions and ridiculous caricatures he reproduces both in his writing as well as his commentary are so easily corrected by the lightest possible research as to essentially solidify the fact that he was simply happy in his ignorance. Or insidious, one or the other. By the way, if you thought Animal Farm critiques Stalinism or whatever other made-up concept, it doesn't. The fundamental thesis of Animal Farm is that the working class is stupid and cannot be trusted to lead any sort of independent political existence. To quote Jonas Manuel, a Brazilian organizer and professor of history, Orwell spends the entire book describing generations of animals as easily confused, dumb, stupid, illiterate, amnesiac, the entire book. The main target of this book's critiques aren't revolutionaries or communism, it's the working class. George
I'm
Orwell
seeing
writes from an
nothing.
aristocratic
I don't know what you guys
elite
are, where
theory
you guys are
posits
getting
the
that
people as
from.
incapable of self-governance, without the capacity to constitute themselves as a political subject, and therefore always the object of dispute and manipulation by vying elites. The people lack the capacity for political self-determination, cannot build a political program or engage in autonomous political action. This is George Orwell's theory, borne out by his choice of metaphors. Animal Farm isn't a critique of revolutionaries, it's a critique of workers. It's an aristocratic manifesto against the working class. This book, Animal Farm, is a deeply reactionary book, displaying aristocratic condescension against the people, a book in which the working class appears as imbeciles. It displays all the marks of the bourgeois genre of elite theory, its historical metaphors for Soviet history whitewash capitalists and imperialists. The USSR is shown as self-sabotaging while its enemies are completely absolved. This is George Orwell and is why he was so successful. I highly recommend you read the article. It's great and full of citations to further bolster the point. I don't want to subject you to excerpts of Animal Farm, after all. By the way, his hatred for the working class was even noticed by the people who fought beside and absolutely hated Orwell in Spain. 1984, on the other hand, doesn't even deserve to be commented on. To quote Asimov again, I read it and found myself absolutely astonished at what I read. I wondered how many people who talked about the novel so glibly had ever read it, or if they had, whether they remembered it at all. I felt I would have to write the critique if only to set people straight. By the time 1984 came out in 1949, the Cold War was at its height. The book therefore proved popular. It was almost a matter of patriotism in the West to buy it and talk about it, and perhaps even to read parts of it, although it is my opinion that more people bought it and talked about it than read it, for it is a dreadfully dull book, didactic, repetitious, and all but motionless. I generally recommend you read this entire review as well. The critique is excellent and really goes to show not only how bad the book is, but also how the literally 1984 types don't even bother to engage with the book.
The reason why I have this, I guess, like more nuanced approach to 1984 is because, like, it's most commonly utilized by right-wingers who don't even understand the main message because they think it's like an anti-communist work across the board when they are literally the defenders of the exact 1984 style forms of governance. It's very, very frustrating and very annoying. It's basically the same grief I have for a lot of people that take like anti-USSR narratives from Trots and then use that as like the formative anti-communist work in general. Like right-wingers who take on any sort of criticism oftentimes from people who have socialist tendencies, socialist leanings, communist tendencies, and take ideological differences and basically weaponize it against existing at the time communist formations. It's very frustrating.
And of course, the incredibly ineffectual and childish criticism of vague or otherwise undefined symbols of power. Keep in mind, though, that Asimov himself is a liberal at the end of the day, so some of his politically oriented comments suffer the usual deficits. Of course, the elephant in the room that Orwell would love to shoot is his supposed leftist convictions. To quote a fantastic article from Red Sails, it is mistaken to imagine that children in the English-speaking world get Orwell's work drilled into them like a mantra because somehow genuine socialists managed to sneak his work past a censor that banishes the likes of Karl Marx and Malcolm X. From the beginning, this supposed socialist had published everything he could in a personal crusade against Marxism, as opposed to his preferred quote-unquote respectable English social democracy. This fact did not go unnoticed by the CIA and practically every other anti-communist outlet that existed. To quote, between 1952 and 1957, from 3 sites in West Germany, a CIA operation codenamed A Dinosaur launched millions of 10-foot balloons carrying copies of George Orwell's Animal Farm and dropped them over Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia, whose air forces were ordered to shoot the balloons down. Even the Animal Farm film, forcibly shoved down millions of kids' throats the world over, was entirely financed by the CIA, a secret they kept for decades. It was entirely produced in Britain too, because the CIA feared that plenty of talent and animators wouldn't go along with such a blatantly anti-communist message. The very script and ending was edited to be even more negative and anti-communist afterwards, as the CIA thought it still seemed too sympathetic. All in all, Orwell was just a garbage person. Personally, politically, professionally, the human equivalent of a clogged toilet. To quote Parenti, safely ensconced within a virulently anti-communist society, Orwell, with Orwellian doublethink, characterized the condemnation of communism as a lonely, courageous act of defiance. Today, his ideological progeny are still at it, offering themselves as intrepid left critics of the left, waging a valiant struggle against imaginary Marxist-Leninist-Stalinist hordes. May he and his ideological progeny rot like their brains often already do.
listen, say what you want about Parenti. He doesn't have photos with Jeffrey Epstein nor Steve Bannon. Okay. It's fashionable to hate Parenti these days, so there's going to be a lot of haters. Yeah, they say that he's too introductory, too elementary, makes people feel like they know more about Marxist Leninists than or anti-imperialism than you actually know. You need to read specific books to get a deeper understanding, all this stuff. I know. So I guess in some ways, the right-wingers are not entirely wrong when they see this as an anti-communist work.
Are equal, but some are more equal than others.
This is our home.
Is Marx's work still relevant for modern economies? Absolutely.
Let's have no one do that again.
Animal Farm, a cautionary tales.
Marx didn't know about TikTok? Okay, fair. That's facts. Except most of the time when people say Marx didn't account for this, it just means that that person hasn't read Marx. Because he accounted for many. He was a poster through and through. Oh my God, they're releasing it on May 1st. Oh my God, they're releasing it on May Day. Maybe the people that actually worked on the project were able to sneak in much more of their own personal politics into it than we assume, and the distribution saw it as an opportunity to do like anti-communist propaganda or something. I don't know. What is May Day? The Workers' Day? Yes, it's the actual International Labor Day. No, Marx really did account for a law. Marx accounted for commodity consumption devoid of commodity, i.e. NFTs, like he accounted for a laborless commodity. Yes, he did. He did account for a lot of the things that people say he didn't account for sure. It's also just a framework. And that is the reason why it's so solid and so reliable as far as like how you can do your analysis. Marx didn't account for me. I'm just OP as true. Are you beginning to see more anti-socialist content now? Pluribus giving me bad vibes as well. I mean, I will admit, yes, Pluribus does seem to have some, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it gave me anti-communist vibes as well. I really like it. It's beautifully shot. But having said that, ideologically, it does make me feel like it's definitely anti-socialist, anti-communist. But we'll see. We'll see where it goes. I mean, it's mysterious. Who knows? I am not making any predictions on that so far. Because, like, I think the work itself is supposed to be anti-AI, but we shall see. I'm pretty sure that the point is that is the critique of American exceptionalism shit, not anti-communist law. I don't know. I mean, Carol is objectively an unlikable person and hyper-individualist, and they do actually present the hive mind as, like, kind of popular and kind of good. Not even kind of good, like objectively good. But what is good if you have no intentionality behind your actions, right? What is good and bad if it's your technically your biological imperative? We shall see.